Cadia, our home, lies scattered across the stars. But do we relent? No, sir! No! For we are vengeance! And we shall bring death to any that threaten the sacred soil of the Imperium. You will give your life in the name of our holy Emperor! Sir, yes, sir! Will you give your life in the name of all that is good and pure? In the name of our holy Emperor? Sir, yes, sir! Then take up the Cadian standard and hold it high so that the enemy will know the name of their executioners!
What the fuck are you doing? How are you alive?
Sorry about the cursor, man. It just literally didn't exist on my screen.
It's alright, I recorded it in 4K.
Oh no, we didn't make it.
Oh, you killed me. Alrighty, welcome back to the channel and to another video. Today I've got a Havoc 40 melee veteran build for you. Now I got a comment in one of my videos asking if I could do like a breakdown of a how to make a build video, and I quickly realized when I was recording that video is that I could talk about that for hours. So I decided to just put that into this video and kind of condense it into what my thoughts are. Because this is not a standard or typical veteran build, I'll do my best to explain the thought processes, how it works. Now we're going to be whipping out the good old paint for this. Now I know this may seem silly, but I want to give a fundamental baseline knowledge of what a build is, how we are going to incorporate that, and how you can optimize your builds. So as far as my experience insight goes, what is a build? It's the items, talents, blessings, perks used to customize and optimize your character to perform certain roles or tasks, whether it's damage dealing, having strong utility, high defensive capabilities, performing specific tactical or strategical roles, and of course, having fun. And then it's about finding the balance, because you can lean into all of these in a Darktide build. It just depends on how far you want to lean into each playstyle. Secondly, what does the build do? First, it provides a baseline boost to your character's power. So you'll have your base stats at level 30, and the second I tech into close order drills, for example, that is a baseline boost to my character that now when I'm in coherency, I'll get up to 33% toughness damage reduction. 2, it force multiplies your current skill and abilities. If you put a strong build on a weak player, it may make him a mediocre player. If you put a strong build on a strong player, it will most likely make him an excellent player. I'm just trying to give a very easy understanding of what I'm trying to say here. But ultimately, remember that we as people, as humans, we have different capabilities and abilities, different strengths and weaknesses. So it's best to make your build play into those strengths and weaknesses if you want the most success as possible. And then 3, it provides an identity or playstyle for your character. If I go the veteran and I take survivalist, executioners, and marksman focus, obviously my identity and playstyle leans into a ranged heavy damage dealing build. If I take smokes with voice of command and focus target, that's a support / defensive build, and depending on the weapons I can still lean into damage like a plasma or power sword. And finally, important goals to aim for in a build. You want good breakpoints or time to kill. A breakpoint meaning, does your build provide the resources required to achieve a 2-shot breakpoint, for example. I'll show exactly what I mean by this in this exact build, where you'll have a standard 2-shot breakpoint against crushers in Havoc 40. However, with the tech points I have available, I can change that breakpoint to a 1-shot breakpoint and effectively halving the time that it takes to kill crushers. It is contingent on crits, and I'll explain that later. Secondly, ways to prevent dying, going down either through toughness damage reduction or toughness replenishment, or both. And then understanding if your build leans into damage dealing, tanking, supporting, all of the above, what your personal abilities and skills are, what you're bringing to the table, and optimizing your build to not have a waste of points. Now coming back to the build, I've got 2 spare points that I'll explain later. And again, this is a melee focused veteran build. In the top section of the talent tree, you can go close order drills, confirmed kill into the stamina boost. And then you can do some tweaks to your Curios, such as block reduction, especially on things like the power sword that have the innate 20% block efficiency. And this will naturally lean into a slower, more controlled, methodical playstyle. If you're more of an aggressive risk taker player like myself, I'm going to opt for 1 motion. When I have to snipe those elites and specials, I can swap back to my melee, get my block out just a little bit quicker. Honestly, close order drills I think is the better talent node here. However, it's mostly for out for blood. I'll get the enhanced toughness replenishment of 10% as opposed to the base 5% in melee. And since I'm going to be stuck in melee a lot, getting 10% toughness on each trash mob that I'm killing, I'm typically killing 3 to 5 in a swing, I can get massive chunks of my toughness back. More importantly, I'm taking into the movement speed. I prefer this over the stamina personally to be where I need and want to be. Again, I do recommend the middle tree is a safer, lower risk, but the reward system is different. The middle tree will reward that methodical playstyle. The right hand side tree will reward a more aggressive playstyle. Then we're going to take into smoke grenades. Now typically the resource veterans use to deal with the ranged specials and elites, the gunners, shotgunners, flamers, netters, blah blah blah, snipers, is ammo. You shoot them, you'll get a bit of ammo back with survivalists, you keep picking it up. That's how you deal with your ranged enemies. Smokes is the resource I'm using in this build to deal with ranged enemies. I'm either going to be throwing them on myself for the concealment buff so we can reposition back into terrain, or I'm going to be throwing them aggressively at the gunners so we can close the distance. They'll get suppressed and staggered from the explosion, and we can take the gunner position and shut them down in the same process. It is also next to the best mini node as far as melee goes on Veteran, 10% melee damage. It's not flashy, but 10% melee damage is a pretty good talent in itself. before we take into consideration power creep, but let's not go there. I'm going to take into serrated blade because the weapon I like using with this build is the power sword, and with Sunder I can cleave the carapace and get all those bleed stacks. However, this will enhance your time to kills against the big chunky ogrons and bosses on any weapon. Depending on your range weapon, such as if you go the double barrel route, which I'll show you later, you can go into agile engagement instead. However, as a preference, I prefer serrated blade. Close and kill for the same reason as the movement speed modifier mini node. We're going down close and kill to save points here. However, you can get rid of serrated blade and go into grenade tinkerer and fire team. Again, it's just a preference. The grenade tinkerer and fire team plays into a more methodical playstyle where you get the 30-second smokes as opposed to 15. But with close and kill, we're playing for that more aggressive playstyle, smoking the gunners, taking their position. That's the playstyle of this build. However, you can tweak it to be more defensive if you like to, and I'll show you what you can do later on. Also, this gives us access to the 5% crit chance mini node, meaning between this and the veteran's base 5% crit chance, we're already at 10% crit chance. Toughness damage reduction mini node, this is nice, but we're taking it really to go into demolition stockpile. You don't spam smokes like you do shredder grenades. You use them to shut down ranged enemies on the ranged lieutenant, and if you have spare in choke points, just to reduce the melee aggro distance. So flamers and dogs, if they get caught in the smoke, netters, they have to really run up to you, and you can just cleave it through the power sword or react to it, especially in those choke points using a block attacks, etc., or the team's AoE. Voice of command and duty and honor. Truthfully, if you're going to be going melee vet, this one is really the only one that makes sense. Infiltrate serves more of an objective based build or a grenade focused build, whereas voice of command's really going to give us the most benefit into melee and help the team. This is adding to the defensive aspect that I was talking before of voice of command, replenishing my toughness and staggering enemies, so the utility aspect. Then with Mango Toughness, Duty and Honor for the same reason, more tankiness by giving myself yellow toughness, but utility through my teammates by providing it for them as well. Now precision strikes is very important. The headshot or weak spot and crit modifiers on every weapon is important, and then remember that the crit weak spot damage is also separate and counted as 1. So let's say you have a 2x bonus on weak spot and a 2x bonus on crits. That doesn't mean you get a 4x bonus on a weak spot crit. It will have its own modifier per weapon, but it's still very important to ramp multiple categories of damage. So ramping your base damage, ramping your weak spot damage, either ramping your crit damage, either through crit damage or through crit chance, to give you those big numbers where the power sword can hit a monstrosity for like 12,000 damage. Yes, those numbers are real, I'm not making that up. Honestly, we're only going this because we don't have a choice. What we really want is superiority complex. However, because we're very methodical with our ammo, we can use that extra 25% well, especially it's also returning more on ammo pickups. You don't need another veteran with survivalist to make this build work, but it's always helpful. Again, this is just a different style of veteran. Now you don't need for the Emperor to reach the one-shot crusher breakpoint, so I don't see a reason for going it. I'd rather just go into Born Leader and get more utility aspects for my team. Tactical awareness, no option, but I'd probably always take it anyway. I'm someone who really favors ability cooldown reduction, as they're typically the highest spikes of a build when your character becomes the strongest during your ability. Iron Will, that sorts us out for the most part for damage reduction. The more confident and better you get with the game, you can pretty much just lean on this by itself. If you want, you can still take gunner resistance on your Curios, or again close order drills at the top, and depending on how heavily you lean into all of it, you'll have anywhere from 52.5 to around 82%, 83% damage reduction. Just between Iron Will and close order drills, it's closer to about 65% damage reduction because there is multiplicative returns. Demolition team and demo stockpile, that's going to sort out our grenade region. We can leave those grenades for other players players, or if we're on 0 and no one else needs them, it's just going to increase the tempo and the pacing that we're capable of by constantly shutting down gunners. Toughness boost, we love it. More importantly, bring it down for the Ogren and monstrosity breakpoints, or rather time to kills on monstrosities, and for the 1-2 shot breakpoints on Ogren enemies. Focus target will just round out the build. Not only does it provide me damage, but it's also applying for the team, especially with the arbitrator, improves their dog damage. As a 1-point investment, I think it's pretty strong. We're going to move on to the right hand side. Again, the 5% melee damage node. We don't care about suppression dealt, and we don't really care about 5% range damage. We're going to be taking reciprocity, even though close quarter kill zone has better uptime on average in Havoc 40. The crits are important to reach that 1-shot breakpoint if you want to do that type of build. For the same reason, Desperado, that crit chance. Now we have a 10% base crit chance from the mini node above Grenadier. We have 20% chance between Desperado, 45% crit chance between Reciprocity when it's fully stacked. And again, because we're playing more aggressive, there's more chance we're actually going to be getting Reciprocity uptime now, as opposed to sitting behind the Ogren, the Zealot, the Arbitrator, and they're taking all the aggro. Like, what are you dodging at that point? You know, you're not getting Reciprocity, that's for damn sure. But the 25% melee finesse bonus, which affects the crit damage and weak spot damage, as well as a tiny bit of attack speed if I'm not mistaken, but it's really for the damage boost that it's giving with precision strikes, with the base damage that we're providing in the build. Now this is the core build. What this will allow you to do is 2-shot crushes in Havoc 40 with the power sword, which I'll show right now. You can dump cleave targets or mobility. Because I'm taking the movement speed, I'm going to be dumping cleave targets, and I take carapace and elite damage as the perks. Elite damage with superiority complex will just give me a 25% damage boost against all armor types as long as they're elites, and I'll be pretty much one-shotting all the trash mobs anyway. I combine that with Power Cycler, which is a must on the Power Sword. Fatshark, if you watch this, please make the Power Sword just have 3 energized attacks, so we can actually use 2 blessings on this weapon. And then the second is you have a choice between Sunder, Brutal Momentum, or Slaughterer. Sunder's going to give the most cleave and allow cleave on energized attacks through Carapace, combining with the Serrated Blade. That's going to be, in my opinion, one of the best ways to deal with mixed hordes, which is your elite, specials, and trash mobs with your melee weapon. You can go into Brutal Momentum to have better horde killing, but your sword energized attacks will get stopped on Carapace, but it will provide the weak spot damage, because truthfully we don't really heavy attack a lot with the Power Sword Mark 6, although you can combine it, or incorporate it rather, with your mixed horde killing, light heavy light or heavy light heavy. And then finally, Slaughterer is going to give us the easiest access to those 1-shot breakpoints when it's stacked, which is easy. It really is like the 1-shot version of the Power Sword. So depending on what you like, I can go Slaughterer right now on the Power Sword and achieve that 1-shot breakpoint on that Crusher, but for the purpose of getting a more general build and a more general purpose melee weapon, I'm going to show you the Sunder 2-shot breakpoint in Havoc 40. Alright, so just so you can see, Encroaching Garden, Rituals, player debuffs, Havoc 40, we'll go straight into it. Alright, as you can see, Havoc 40, let me turn this down just a tiny bit. I'm going to spawn in a Crusher, and assuming I don't crit on the first hit, which even if I do, I don't think I have the 1-shot potential with this specific setup, I'll show you that we can 2-shot Crushers very consistently. Now, the reason I'm not testing in an Auric Psychanium is because they don't have the 50% extra HP that Havoc 40 enemies do, so things that you test in an Auric Maelstrom, or sorry, an Auric Psychanium will not translate to Havoc 40, so this is why it's important to test things like this if you're able to. So I'm sorry console players, you just don't have access to that. Fatshark, if you watch this, add a Havoc slider to Psychanium so everyone can start testing their builds properly. Now that was just to showcase the concept and the point of the build. The hardest enemies in the game are going to drop to 2 hits as long as you're hitting your weak spots and using that finesse scaling damage. Alrighty, now with the core concept of the build out of the way, to the 1-shot breakpoints on Crushers. There's a couple of ways to do it. You'll take Marksman Focus and you'll swap Born Leader to For the Emperor, and that will allow the one-shot breakpoint. You can go Marksman Focus and Redirect Fire. So on your shouts, if you crit on that first attack, you'll get the one-shot breakpoint, and I will show that right now just so you can see. Now, I just want to showcase that Marksman and Redirect Fire with the core build is the minimum requirement that you need to hit that one-shot breakpoint, assuming you crit and hit a weak spot. Now, the only reason you'll need more damage is into Bulwarks because they have higher HP than Crushers. So you can remove Redirect Fire to put it back into close quarter kill zone to now hit those Bulwark one-shots. Again, if you still want more damage for the Emperor, this will now just improve your cleave and boss damage. But now that you know the different ways that you can access those one-shots against Crushers, again, the minimum being Marksman and Redirect Fire, now you can fine-tune it to what you like to one-shot any enemy or elite or special enemy in Darktide with the power sword. Do some tweaking with different weapons and see what works best for you. Let's say I am happy with the two-shot breakpoint on Crushers. Stab into overhead with the push attack. Just a couple of things to consider depending on your weapon. If you're choosing a weapon that is not innately good into armor and doesn't have the option to deal with armor, so for example, the power sword is innately good against armor, or you have the shovel that has uncanny strike so that it can deal with armor, I'm going to be recommending Exploit Weakness and Rending Strikes, just to make pretty much any weapon deal with any enemy type. That is niche depending on the weapon or melee weapon that you take, however. Alternatively, you can go into the toughness boost to get tankier and take the melee attack speed boost, which will make it more fluid. You're committing to the two-shot breakpoint, but because you have more attack speed now, your time to kill is still getting closer to that one-shot breakpoint of just that one single heavy attack. You can dump it into target down and Redirect Fire to bump that utility, defense, and damage aspects for not only you, but your team as well. You can tech out of one of these, depending on what you prefer, to then go into Field Improvisation, or if you don't want to go into any of the augments at all, you can also come back to Agile Engagement, tech out of this, Redirect Fire or Marksman Focus. That's another way to get that breakpoint as well with Agile Engagement, depending on the weapon that you're using, such as a shotgun. If you want to do res speed on your Curios, you can put that extra point into Leave No One Behind. There's a lot of options here, just find what you like. If I want more of a balanced playstyle, I could even go Shock Trooper with like a las pistol, for example. Go into target down for the extra mobility, it gives me more access to more push attacks with the stamina regen. But ultimately, that is the core build. You decide what you want to do with it and how you want to tech it to your preferences. In terms of the weapons, honestly, anything works. It is melee vet. I just like the power sword the most. It works with the knife. I use this on the shovel. Because I'm already teching into Serrated Blade, you're pretty much, the way I see melee vet is you won't attack as fast as a zealot, but you hit harder than a zealot because veteran has more access to raw damage in his talent tree than zealot. But zealot has, you know, Holy Revenant, Blazing Piety. We have to go Desperado and Precision Strikes to match Duelist. But then we also have Marksman. So veteran, even though he has to invest more points, objectively have more access to damage. The zealot's the crackhead, whereas the veteran is your lemon, lime, and bitter. And I like my lemon, lime, bitters, what can I say? But just to give you a couple of options that you may enjoy, a Flacken and Armored, Chain Axe with Slaughterer, Mark IV with the push attacks, can get you some decent horde clear. With the Serrated Blade, you don't need Bloodletter. If you want to go lean more into the one shot, you'll go like a Flat Carapace, Thunderous, Bloodletter, Chain Axe, Rev, Heavy, hit the one shot on the Crusher in the face with Focus Target. I've already got a video on this, but this is one of the easier weapons to hit those one shot breakpoints onto Crushers. If you want more of a generalist weapon, Opportunist will give that rending, so we don't need it in the talent tree. We can go for more damage or attack speed. Slaughter is going to improve our cleave impact and damage, as well as improve those bleed stacks that I'm getting through Serrated Blade. If you're taking something like the Assault Chainsword, I would recommend Exploit Weakness and Rending Strikes just to make it feel and perform better into those crushes. Mauler Heads and the Scab Rager Torsos now. You can go Wrath and Rampage, Flak Maniac or Flacken and Armored for the best horde killing, depending if you have Mobin 21st when that comes back, for example. You can also go for a Rampage and Shred. Because we have Serrated Blade, you don't need Bloodletter. Combat Axe with Head Taker and Brutal Momentum, Flacken and Armored will hit those nice one-shot breakpoints on the trash mobs. This is a weapon where you can consider going the Rending talents if you want. It doesn't necessarily need it, but I find it really helps the time to kill in those mass armor waves. Carapace Elite or Carapace and Unyielding, Uncanny and Flesh Terror Knife is my preference. Now, because we have Serrated Blade, you don't need Flesh Terror, so I would replace that with Mercy Killer. You also don't need Uncanny Strike, but it really does help into those big armored waves. You can still go the precog and riposte route. You can go Uncanny and riposte. You've got quite a few options. The knife is very versatile. You can dump damage or mobility, and I recommend the Mark 6 combat knife. If you're going for the Flesh Terror route, you can dump damage, but if you're going for the Mercy Killer or precog riposte route, I would recommend just dumping the mobility. Dueling Sword, Uncanny, riposte, Uncanny, and Agile are my favorite ways to use this, Carapace and Unyielding, although I don't use the Dueling Sword that often. The Heavy Sword, Flacken and Armored, Head Taker, and Blade of Momentum. If you tech into the Rending in the talent tree, you can remove Blade of Momentum or keep both, or replace Blade of Momentum for Rampage. Even though Rampage only says it affects damage, it improves melee power, so it'll do the same thing as Head Taker. Shovel, Flacken and Armored, or Flak and Carapace, depending if you want better time to kills against your crushers, maulers, etc., or if you want to be able to just heavy attack and two-shot the trash mobs. All or Nothing or Decimator combining with Uncanny Strike is going to be my recommendations. Now, All or Nothing is bugged on the shovel. It gives up to 50% strength as stamina depletes. This is unique to the shovels and the tack axe if I'm not mistaken. All or Nothing is typically something that I prefer on Grenade Veteran if you're not going target down for the stamina replenishment, but if you're on top of your macro, I do actually like All or Nothing. I find it, once you learn to play around it, it is actually just a more consistent decimator, and I'm quite a fan, truthfully. Opportunist and Skull Crusher on the Shockmaw, I actually prefer the Minotaurum. For the horizontal heavy light combo, you can do a push attack into a light, into a heavy, and then chain the light heavy for the horizontal sweeps, or do the heavy light combo, the Minotaurum, for the overhead attacks for single target, and then your Agni is going to be like your left one, mix in some heavies to do your most single target damage. It's got the most strike down attacks. You can replace Opportunist for high voltage, but again, I've noticed that having Rending in a high Havoc environment can be a lifesaver if your team's not prepared for it. Tack Axe, All or Nothing, and Brutal Momentum, Flacken and Armored, same reasons the Rashad or Combat Axe previously. Now onto the range weapon, you're really looking for weapons that are going to be ammo efficient. So the bolt pistol comes to mind. It is naturally ammo efficient. You really only use it for the one-tap headshots on specials, range elites, etc. Flacken and Armored for those one-shot breakpoints. Keep Puncture for those breakpoints, but you would replace Lethal Proximity for Hit and Run just to be more mobile, get access to more damage, and still contribute to those one-shot breakpoints. The Combat Shotgun buff, incredibly good. You can go a Man-Stopper Flechette, Man-Stopper Scattershot. You can go a Death Spitter and Man-Stopper build. Again, I'm going to be recommending Flacken and Armored or Flak and Maniac on this weapon. If you want the most Man-Stopper attacks, you'll go Man-Stopper and Scattershot, but I find I have enough crit chance. I don't need the guaranteed crit chance of Weapon Specialist to make the weapon perform, and Man-Stopper and Death Spitter was honestly my favorite way to run the Combat Shotgun on the Veteran specifically. I like both barrels, and Death Spitter with Flak Maniac on the double barrel shotgun is something like Heinous Rituals. You can point blank, or sorry, use the alternate fire to one-shot each cultist. You'll get one-shot breakpoints on the normal rages depending on your Death Spitter and how close they are, because the damage fall-off is really high, so make sure you're getting in nice and close. Really good for just one-tapping those range elites as well, getting a good amount of cleave. Same thing, you can go the Death Spitter and Man-Stopper variant. Just play around, see what blessings you like. Because we have the damage in this build, we can hit a lot of those juicy breakpoints, especially when you're using the shotguns with agile engagement. Any of the last weapons are going to do okay because you can combine it with Shock Trooper, but out of all of them, I'm going to go the Heavy Las pistol. Both the Mark II and Marks X are good. I played around with both of them. I don't necessarily have a preference. I find the Heavy Las pistol 2 is going to be better for a crit focused build, getting those unyielding stacks nice and quickly, whereas the Heavy Las pistol Mark 10 is going to do better with the Dum Dum and Infernus route, kind of forego those crit chance, lean into those break points. You'll go flak and unarmored on the Mark X in my opinion, whereas you can go flak and unyielding on the Heavy Las pistol 2. Again, Dum Dum and Infernus, or Infernus and Desperado if you just want to ramp more flame damage. For bosses specifically, you'll have the Serrated Blade with your melee weapon. You'll get 2 versions of dots off, really contribute to burning those bosses down. Combining with Bring It Down and Focus Target, you can really just mulch weapons. Again, any las weapon works when you take Shock Trooper if you want to tech into that, but for being the most ammo efficient and being a proper good mobile sidearm to use as a secondary, not your primary weapon, I'm going to recommend the Heavy Las pistol. You can also go into the revolver. You will have to deal with the reload speed. You can use those points and take off Focus Target to go into Weapon Specialist, but then you will need to find the point for Always Prepared. So, you know, there is a trade-off here. For that reason, I've actually been preferring the Agrippina with Hand Cannon and Crucian Roulette. I've just been testing different breakpoints and stuff. I would still recommend either Flak and Unarmored, Flak Maniac. I wouldn't use it as a carapace killer because that's usually what your melee is going to be used for. And last but not least is going to be the Shredder Auto Pistol. You can go with a Blaze Away and Cavalcade, Flak and Unarmored, or again, Flak and Maniac if you want to deal with Rages and the Maniac specials. Or alternatively, you can replace Cavalcade for Inspiring Barrage. While you're moving, you can whip out, you can sprint and shoot the Shredder Auto Pistol now and get your toughness back. It's just a cheeky, ready way that you can have like a safe sidearm. That really covers all the weapon choices I've been having success and I find work best with the build. But again, I encourage you to have fun, experiment, and see what you come up with. In terms of the Curios, I run double toughness, 1 stamina with stamina regeneration and toughness. In this build, you can replace combat ability regen with block efficiency depending on your weapon. You will be able to perfect block a crusher attack, not the overhead, but their standard attack, and not get instantly nuked from your stamina. Likewise with maulers, as long as they don't do the overhead attack, you can actually attack their underhand swing that usually chunks all of your toughness anyway. You can replace it for health if you want a little bit more tankiness. Take an extra hit or 2 from the trash mobs before you go down, helps against corruption, but those are going to be my recommendations. But anywho's, I'll leave you with some gameplay. I'll leave a couple of scoreboards so you know this build performs. This is unironically one of my highest damage builds alongside Grenade Veteran. It is one of the few builds that can keep up and still outperform Ogren and the Adeptus Arbites. If you're playing to that level, it is a highly aggressive but very capable build. Anywho's, catch you in the next video. God bless 07.